Well, hello and welcome to my channel. This is Johnny, and I'm also starting this new adventure on this new channel, and it is JJ3 Quilt Creations Company LLC. So, if this is your first time, please do me a favor. Don't forget to do me a favor. It's free. Right below the video, that word subscribe, make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you hit the notifications of all. Right next to it, there's that thumbs up. Make sure you hit the thumbs up because I would greatly appreciate it. It does promote my channel, as well as leave me those comments below because I'll be glad to answer them for you. And I do answer all comments. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start showing you some step-by-steps on what I'm doing. And first, I'm going to go across right here and show you the wall that I'm going to be doing. This is my creation wall. And I basically use a quilting batting, but when I very first started, I used the actual table cover that I bought from the Dollar Tree until I was able to get one of these. And this is like one of those, you basically Fawns and Focus. Oh, I'm sorry, Fawns and Porter. Anyways, what I used to create, and I'll show you that through the show. And basically, this is the quilt similar to this that I'm going to be making. But I'm using that pattern with these color themes that I'm using. And we'll see this from start to finish. All right, basically what I'm going to be using for this particular cutting situation is I have this ruler that has this little lip on the back of it. And that's what I'm going to use to catch on the table to get my ruler flat so I can do my cutting with a rotary cutter. And I'm also using one of these long mats. It's a cutting mat that I use to cut my fabric with. And what I like about this is and I'm going to show this a little closer, this little ruler basically is going to fit flat side against this when I go to cut it. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. But first what I'm going to do is, I already have all my fabric picked out, basically what I'm going to use, except for I do need to pick out a few things with dogs and cats. This is going to be a form. I don't know why I'm stuttering. How about I get my email? This is going to be a quilt that's going to be a wall hanging. It's going to be considered a farm style quilt hanger. They would like for me to include cats, dogs, chickens, and designs it also with goats. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to start by the way I'm going to create this without any measurements. But I do know what my measurement is on the whole thing. It's going to be 32 long by 30 down deep. In other words, 30 wide by 32 wide. I don't know what I'm saying. Lord Jesus. Get it together, Johnny. All right, so it's going to be 32 inches by 30 is the size I'm going to basically form this in. Now, what I did was on this, if you may notice on the, before I get started, you will notice that I did already measure this out by these little X's. So that means this length this way is the 32. And from this X up here to this X, and that's just a fabric marker, and that's going to be my 30 length. So I'm going to stay within that border when creating this. And this is my creation wall. And so that's how we're going to get started. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my focal point. And this is the first I'm going to start it with, is this fabric here. Now, what I'm doing with this is, why am I getting pixelated? What I'm doing with this is I'm going to cut off a strip of this to start it off with. And what I do is whenever I do fabric, before I actually cut anything, I iron it flat backside up, where the print is facing the ironing board. And I'm going to go ahead and flatten this out because I want to make sure it's flat before I cut it, because that way I can definitely cut the way I want without having to have those little edges from when it was folded. And this way here it stays much flatter and I get a true measurement when I'm doing this. So that's why I always put the fabric upside down and I press it on my ironing is set on cotton and it's steamy, so I can get those lines out best as I can. Because the more I fool with it and sew, the more it's going to be stretched. And there we go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little section, flip it back over, and I'm going to try to find the focal point of where I want it to start and stop, because that's going to be the length of my very top portion of this. And then I'm going to use this for my border. The next fabric I'm cutting is farm animal prints, and I already cut it into 32 and a little bit extra. because this will be my main border for the top and bottom, but I'm going to be using this for the basically like a picture frame, and this will be my outer border on the main brain freeze on the main wall hanging that I'm making. So what I'm going to do is, because of the way these are repetitively in the same area way it goes, and there is a space in between, I'm going to, because it starts here without scarecrows and corn, I'm going to cut along this and take this green out, and I may use it somewhere else within the wall hanging, but I'm going to cut each one here to where I need 2 of these for top and bottom, and then I'll make the sides as the border. So what I'm going to do is, again, I do use I already ironed it, made it flat, and then what I want to do is make sure that the end of each piece is lined up. So when I do cut this, it'll be as straight as possible. And I use the line to where I use this line on one side and at the bottom as my guide to make it straight. Then I'm going to use my cutting ruler, and I'm going to make sure, because you also allow for a 1/4 inch seam when you're sewing all this together. So I'm going to make sure I come a little bit higher than this first one. And so I want to make sure I'm on the dotted line. And this one, so I'm going to come back 1. And also this ruler has lines, and I'm going to use that line on this main one on number 4 to cut along the top. Then I use my rotary cutter. And actually I need to come out some more. So let's see here. There is the 4 right there, and I'm going to go ahead and cut there. And I need more room, so I'm going to go up some more. And there we go. That's the first set. Then I'm going to take this and put this to the side, because I will use it somewhere else throughout the quilt. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back now and make this even with my line here at the bottom of the cutting mat and the side. That way my line's straight here, and I'm flush here on the bottom of the line. Now I'm going to cut this section, because that's the print I want. And I'm going to come right between the 2 and then make sure that I get it all the way through the dots and line my line up on my ruler to where I can make sure I'm right at the bottom of the bottom of the corn stack, the stalk. I'm lining up my line right above that where the scarecrow's feet are, making sure I'm aligned on all of those, and that'll be my cut. All right, so this will be one piece, and that'll be starting on my border along the bottom and the top, and I'll go ahead and get those done, and I'll show you on the wall what it looks like as I'm creating this, again with no pattern, just a picture. For me to get my side views, I want to make sure I'm seeing the print lengthwise. So now I'm going to fold that fabric to where it is actually longer instead of wider. Now I'm going to double all of this, making sure all my lines are straightened up here. And then I'll take this and fold that again. Again, line everything up here. Nice and flat. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to cut this into 2.5. And go ahead and put these together, because that means I'm going to have to sew those together and make my border, which is fine. That's no problem. What I need to do is I'll come back and cut that over, and I'm going to do 2.25 again. Line my ruler up, top and bottom. And then again, do a little pressure and cut right through all of that fabric. Slowly pull and see if it got it. In this case, I have a rotary blade sharpener that I need to sharpen these, because it's been a while that I used them. So now I have 2. I'll take the top one and match it with the top one that I cut, so the exact cut throughout the whole thing. That'll be one border. And I'm going to go ahead and measure. It's 50, and that's perfect. So that's one side. And here is my other. And so I'll take these 2, and those 2 match. And because I need to go this way, I'm making sure that the scarecrows are headed up. And these are as well. And so that is correct. So these 2 are going to be sewed together to make one sideboard. The very first tip I'm going to give that I do with sewing is, you see that very top border? Because I always do top and bottom with borders, then I'll go to the sides. You want to do your sides after. That's just the way I do borders, and I was told that's how typically you do borders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, starting with these borders, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the top and bottom first, these two and these two, and I'll start sewing these two together, and then I'll start going square by square and adding it to it, because I also want to make sure when I sew the sides, that'll be the last thing I sew, because I want to make sure I have all these done, where there's a border between each one of these pictures, and then I'll sew them all together. So I want to do the top and bottom border first, and then I'll go from there. On this, I'm going to start using the brother from my sewing. I'll always do this, put the arm down when I'm not using this. So I'm going to get that out of there. That's just for me to have it. Now, one of the things I like using about this machine when I'm sewing is because this has a little quarter-inch little guide that I use right here. And I'll show you a little bit further closer so you can see what it looks like. And it's just a little guide that for the foot that I slide the material, the fabric when I'm sewing next to this, so that I always get my quarter-inch seam. And I'll show you this side so you can see there's a little wall right here. And that's what I use to guide everything I sew with on that foot. That way when I do it, I get a quarter-inch seam on everything I sew. All right, so I'm going to get into sewing. One of the first tips I want to give you when doing the borders, what I want to do is I want to make sure that my top border is what I'm going to be doing, where this is actually the way it's going to be on the top, and I'm doing the top border first. You want to make sure that you have it correctly, so put it upside down, and you want to make sure you have it face to face. Whatever your print is, you put it face to face, and I'm going to start right here at the edge, and I'm going to start here, and I did cut extra just in case, which is fine. I take all my scraps and put up scraps when I'm done, and then I'll put them into a container that I use for making a scrap quilt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this one, and I'm going to do the bottom one, and I'll show you what it looks like right after I'm done with that. Now that I have the top and bottom border, and I do this every time I sew items together, I want to make sure you can do one of two things. You can either flatten this out to where the seam goes flat on one side in the center, or you can go left or right, it doesn't matter. But what I'm doing is I'm going to push everything upward. That way when I'm done, it'll be a nice flat seam, for makes it easier for when I go to sew it all together. Now you can either do it upside down, or I'll just take and do it either way. But when you do, I'm going to do it this way, because this is this way, because that's the top. This is the top one. I have the bottom one left on me. Let's see here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start on one end and make sure it's flat. And as I do this, I'm going to keep my arm, and I'm going to keep going flat as I go by pulling the material, the fabric apart from each other to keep it flat. That way I can get that seam all going the same direction, which in this case I'm going upward. And so I want to make sure it's completely flat. I don't want any big gaps, but I want to make sure it's all flat. This way here, now when I go to sew it, I already have that seam flat that I don't have to worry about. Let me go ahead and do the second one, and I'll show you what it looks like after. Now, as you see, it's nice and flat. This one is my bottom portion. This will be my top portion, so I need to turn it like that, and that'll be my top, and that's my bottom of the actual frame that I'm starting with. So I'll go ahead and keep doing that to all of them until I add them together, and as I add them together, I'll show you the progress as we go. All right, now that I sewed the other two pieces to this one square, because this will be the next one, I'm going from top to bottom. So I went ahead and did both sides. Now what I want to show you on this one is, again, when you're ironing them, I always press them when I'm done with each square. Now on this one, I'm going to take the flips, and I'm going to put them on inside each other. That way they're on the same. You can do either out, in, one out, one in. It's up to you. But that's just the way I do it to get that flatness. This way here, when I'm going to sew everything together, it's nice and pressed already. And that's why I do this little trick. And I do that with everything I sew when it comes to sewing. And we'll keep going as we go. All right, it took me 2 hours to sew everything here. Total of 3. I had to re-sew some pieces, add some pieces here and there. But here's the finished product. Again, I got to do the front, the batting and the backing and the binding. That's what's left. This is day 2. And as you see, it's a little all over with all kind of dogs, cats, farm animals. And that's what they wanted. And there it is, ready to be put together on the quilting machine. Long arm Juki. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the quilt that we've been working on. Actually, it's a wall hanging. I'm going to put it on the machine so we can start going ahead and hand-free quilting it. So what I need to do first is I have the bar 1, bar 2, and bar 3 right below me. And I'll show you those steps on how I get prepared so I can start doing the actual quilting portion of this. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to first start with the backing that you're going to use for the back of the quilt, or wall hanging in this case. You have to put it upside down because we're actually piecing it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pin the top one to the bar 1 and bar 2. That's my backing. So I'll show you how I do that, and then I'll go ahead and keep going through it, the steps as I go. I keep my safety pins in a tote so I can use them to pin this too, because this is how I start everything. And of course I'm going to take the top, I'm going to move this out my way for a minute because I need that later. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I want to make sure I have enough backing, which I should. So what I'm going to do is always have a little extra. So what I'm going to do is pair it up and making sure either way that I have enough. So I want to make sure if I do it one way or another and it won't work that way. Maybe. Yeah, that's not going to be enough that way, so I have to go lengthwise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically, you set up how you're going to do it on your machine first, because I want to make sure I have extra on both sides, because I will have to make sure I have enough on top, bottom, and on the front, which so far that matches. And I will have to start a little bit past it so I can pin it, so that would work. So I did cut extra on this. I'm just going to flatten it out to make sure I do have extra at the bottom, which is correct. So that's how I'm going to start that. Then I know about an inch, half an inch to an inch on the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top portion, and because my bar, I need to turn it the way it's going to be turned. Sorry for the noise. That's how I make it tight as I turn it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on one end. And I usually take a line that matches the top and the bottom of the two, because these all have lines on them, the little white pieces here. If you can see the lines on here. And I want to make sure I try to match the line from the top to the bottom, which will be this line right here. That is like my leader. And so I have a little margin right here that I'm going to work on. It's called the hem fold. And I'm just going to start pinning this all the way across. And I'll show you how that happens, what it looks like after I'm done. As you see, each one of these has markings and lines. This right here is your actual pin line, where you would actually put the pin for your fabric, and it gives you a 1/4 inch, actually a 1/2 inch right here. So that gives you room to start. And then you basically pin all the way across, because that's going to be the bottom of that, or backing. So that's going to be your first one. Now I'm going to take and roll this up, and now I'm going to pin it to roll number 2, which is this one right here that I'm going to do next, and follow the same procedure. And these are basically used for lining up my quilts when I'm starting to get ready to quilt them. And then I have the third one, which I'll show when I get to that third one down there at the bottom. That is the bar number 3. 1 and 2 go for the bottom, and then I go from 1 to the bottom for batting, and then 1 to 3 for the top. And we'll show you that as soon as I get to that step. All right, now that I have the top, when I say top, meaning I'm working from the top down to the bottom, I already have the top pinned, and I have the bottom pinned, and now I'm going to start rolling this one for the backing, because I want it as tight as possible. So what I'm going to do is, and I need to step away to unclip this, it's just a mechanism that helps me keep this tight. Now I'm going to take and roll this one up first and keep it as tight as possible, because when I'm sewing it, I can release it this way one at a time as I need it, and keeping it as tight as possible. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically keep turning until I have this all the way. And because it's a short piece, I don't have to work too long. Usually if it's a bigger quilt, then yes, I have to keep this as tight as possible. And just keep working it until I get it all even with no bumps. Making sure it's nice and smooth. And I'll keep doing this until I get this nice and straight and tight. And this is how I basically do this. Again, you may have different methods, but this is how I do it. I use a Juki long arm, and this big metal frame can do up to a Super King, which I've done before. And this is the best way to keep a nice tight stitch when I'm actually starting to quilt the actual piece. So it's just a matter of keeping nice and even and tight on both sides. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the handle just to keep it tight the whole way through. And so there it is. I'm going to lock it in place. And there's my bottom, the back side of the quilt. Now, my next step is the batting, which is right here. Now, I did cut it longer because I do buy these by the roll. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll show the rolls at the bottom once I'm done. But I did cut this longer because of the fact that it is folded on the roll. So I don't need all of this. But I did cut it enough to where it's going to be longer. And then I'm going to get the both sides and pull this as I go. But just to double check, I did cut enough to where when I'm doing this, it'll still be covered with a whole bunch of extra. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on one side and keep everything flushed on one end. So that way if I have to cut any extra off when I'm done, it'll all be on one side that I can also use for scraps. So that's why I'm starting it. I'm basing everything from this side to my left. And because this is doubled, I only need to make this a single because this is the batting that I use for all quilting. And I'm going to start over here on this side. And I'm just basically going to roll this up to where the pins are. And again, keeping that flat up to the pins, but I will go a little over the pins because I want to make sure I have that little bit of extra above it. And it's just basically keeping that flat as possible, which is nice and smooth. Then I'm going to take the rest of this, and because I'm going to be using this number 3 bar, I'm going to let it slope through between the 2 bars, and it only will come up as I need it. So the rest will flip to the bottom of this bar, and that way it comes up as I roll it. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is the top. Now that I got that all in place, we're going to take the top of the quilt. And I'm going to lay this across. This is my top. And the only reason I know this is because of this panel right here is the panel that I know that's the top of I'm actually making a wall hanging with this. So what I'm going to do also with this is I'm going to start as close as I can over here. That way anything I do have extra, I'll cut it all from one side as overdone, over. And this way here I'm going to keep this portion tight as I'm sewing it. But I will pin the bottom. So I'm making sure it's all straight across. And you pull all excess to the bottom. Getting any and all wrinkles out. Keeping it flat, making sure I still have enough on the side. And then I have enough here at the bottom, which I do. Now, what I'm going to do next is, to keep all this tight as I'm moving it, number 3 is where now I will now pin this to the bottom of this one on the pin line. That way that'll keep it tight underneath as I'm kneading it, because once I'm done, this will come all the way to the top. I'll have enough leader to still be able to sew as I need, and then when I get to this portion, I can unpin it and finish the quilt, because at that time, all the rest of this will be rolled to the top, and I'll have all my stitching. So I'm going to do that, and I'll show you the next. Now that I have the bottom pinned, now it's time to get it tight. But before I do that, I just realized I didn't pin the top corners, because I don't want to start pulling it and it pulls the top off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin these right in the corners, just to keep it in place at the top, which I thought I did and I didn't. But that's alright, because I'm going to do it before I start rolling it to the bottom. And I still have a little bit extra over the bottom of it, so I'm good to go. So I'll put these in a 45-degree angle in the corner, and then I'll put one right in the center at the top. That way when I do start quilting this, I can just take those pins out after, once I get to that section. Because when I'm done, the front should be over rolled top over, instead of under over. Again, keep doing it until you get it all straight across. And then I realized after I did it, it should be over, not under. And I'm just doing this to keep all of that straight across without any lumps. And it keeps the quilt top tight as I'm sewing it. And just a matter of doing this until you get it all rolled up. And again, if you're doing like a bigger quilt, you will have to do this the whole length of it. Whereas here, I'm only doing a wall hanging, so it's not as long or as wide as a usual quilt. This happens to be a 38 by 33. All right, make sure it's nice and tight. Pull it that way. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull and turn just the rod, not just the rod itself, making sure that the batting and everything's free flowing in the bottom, which it is. All right. There we go. Now, it is ready to start sewing. As you see, it's nice and flat. And it is pulling a little bit at the top, but that's okay because I will sew all that together and it'll work out perfect. Now I'm going to lock this bar in place and it's ready to go. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I have these expansion bar pieces. And I'll show you this in a second here. These are little clips that I use, basically to pull both sides. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this up. I'm going to clip this. Basically, you clip it to where it pulls all pieces. Make sure you got them all grabbed. And then I'm going to pull this tight. It's more like an expansion, and it keeps it pulled. And then I have this little garter. It's like a stopper. Then I'm going to pull there. And then I'll do the top of the quilt the same way on the second pull. Making sure I get all three pieces, top, bottom, and the middle. Get all of them. That'll help me keep everything pulled to the sides as well. And then this will be the last step before I start actually sewing the quilt. And then I'll lock it in place with the little lock piece right there. And then pull this lock. That way it's out of the way. Because this is a shorter piece that I'm making, that's why I need to stretch these as long as possible. And I do have it's like a bungee cable. So what I'm going to do on this one is I only have enough to grab the top, the bottom, and the matting, which is fine, the batting itself, which is fine because I can pull it in like that. And then I'll do the same thing, these bungees. I'll clip it here first. That way it's nice and tight. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to... All right, I'm going to have to do this with the rest of it on my phone because the camera got too hot, my GoPro. Basically what I'm doing is here's where I was at with the bungees, tying it tight. And then this goes into the frame itself. So what I have to do is pull this tight. And I'm taking this as I'm pulling it to make sure it stays tight. And then you see this small little groove right here? This little groove is where I'm going to actually put it in there once I'm done tight enough. That'll stop it. And then basically I'm going to take this little cord piece right here. This little piece here. And I'm going to tighten that with that. And basically there's a little button you push in. And then I'm going to tighten it here. And the same thing on this side. I'm basically pulling it tight here. Locking it in place. Pulling this. And then basically the rest is all extra. So I have it tight here. And there's a little button right here that I'll push to tighten it. And now that's in place to where both sides are pulled and stretched. And I have all this extra. The top is extra. And the bottom's going to have some extra. But I'm right here about a ½ inch along the side here. As you see, that's the backing. So I do have some extra over. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to start showing you the next step. And now that is the actual way I actually put it on the machine to start quilting. Now that I have everything set up, I already have my machine made sure it was threaded. I did do at least 3 bobbins other than the one that's already in the machine. I use this little device called the Sure Stitch, and you have to make sure it's all set up. I do have my machine itself set on medium. You can either do slow like a turtle or fast like a rabbit. But on this one, I also do the Sure Stitch, and I use 5. And it also goes to depending on how fast you move your machine. This machine is on two tables, one that goes front to back and one that goes side to side. So when I'm doing this, I'm moving it this way, but I'm also going front to back. So that's how I'm going to be doing this. And then right now, I want to make sure that I'm caught into the pin. I'm going to make sure it's all nice and thin right here. I say thin, but all pulled. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this a little bit down so I can still have it clipped. And I'm going to start by unpinning my very first pin up here, because that's where I'm going to start. And this is going to be a freestand. I do not use computerized stitching. If I were to use stencils, which I can, I have a laser light right here that I would use. In other words, when I do use this, turn it on. It may need a battery. Yeah, I don't have a battery in it right now. When I moved, I didn't put a battery back in. But anyway, this is a little light that you can put on either side of your machine depending on which way you're going. And it basically laser lights a red light to where your stitching is, but I'm doing mine all freehand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right in this corner. All right, basically what I'm doing here is I need to move this bar away from the long arm machine so I can have room to sew a stitch. So what I'm doing is I loosen the bottom so I can slowly turn it upward. And I'm slowly turning it to where I got a lot of room to work with so I can do a couple of rows. And the only way to do that, you have to give yourself some room to do the work. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bottom, I'm going to tighten it up some more. Because now that I got that space, which I didn't realize, it's like a rookie, you know? Like I'm just starting out kind of thing. No, it's not. I've done many a quilt. But anyway, not realizing I have to have the space to move. And it won't let you do that if you're that close to the machine, right? All right, so now let's go back to where I was at. I'm going to go ahead and go back to what I was doing here. I already did the top across to make sure everything was good. Now I'm going to go across, and I forgot, again, it's been a while that I did one because I have so many already made that it was like a rookie mistake. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get back to this. Now basically, I'm going to free throw this. It's almost like making puzzle designs is what I'm doing. I'm not doing any special. I will make at the bottom of the I don't know why I'm all over the place. This is not like new to me doing this kind of stuff. Anywho, at the bottom I'm going to keep in the stitching portion, I will be doing a special message within the stitching. All right, so we are recording. Let's go. And as you move the machine, as the speed is going to go, and I'm just basically moving it around, making it look like puzzle pieces. Trying to make sure I get every little nook and cranny. Not missing any space. I'm just going around and doing this like a puzzle piece. And I'll make sure I get all pieces. And I'm making sure that my stitching is tight. For some reason, it looks like my stitching is not tight enough. But it looks like it's okay. It's just a matter of keeping the machine moving. And basically this is what I'm going to do throughout the whole quilt, or any quilt I make. Sometimes I do add my little personal little hidden messages in within them. And this is basically what I'm going to be doing throughout the quilt. In this case it's a wall hanging. And I'm going to get that first row done. And I will stop right there on the end. And then I will stop it. Stop. There we go. Now the first row is done, and I'm going to keep doing this throughout the whole thing until I'm done, and I'm going to show you how I do a little hidden message at the bottom of the quilt. This is only because it's a special order. I'm at the end right here, and I wanted to show you how I do this with the pins at the bottom. And basically that's where I'm at, and I'm going to show you as I go because I already did almost half of it. Not realizing that I wasn't going to be filming this yet. So anywho, here we go back to this one. I'm going to get back to this, and I'm going to show you. As I get to this, you will notice I'll be pulling the pins back just to get as close as I can to the pin without going on the pin, because that's going to be a disaster popping the needle. All right, so here we go. Start. as I'm doing this, I'm just pulling the pins back towards me so I can get as close as I can to the edge. I want to make sure I get that close because that's where the binding is going to be. And I don't want to go too close to where I'm going to have the pins popping my needle. All right, messages in there. With love from Mom. And I did that across in the blue. So it kind of mixes it in, but you kind of little search for it, a little see you can find. With love from Mom. And you'll better see it on the backside because it's not as busy. So they should better see that in the backside. It's just a little something I put extra in when somebody orders something special. I'll even do like things like if it's a religious or Christian type one, I'll put little crosses and hearts and things like that in them. So yeah, if anybody, and they didn't ask for it, I'm just throwing it in there. You know what I'm saying? I'm already doing this part, so why not? So now I'm going to take this off the machine, and guess what time it is? It is time for the two things I got to do. I already have them cut out. I just got to sew them. This is the binding that I'm using for the side of this, which I'll show you as I get that portion done. This is actually cut in a 2.5 width, and then ironed in half to get you the actual binding that goes around the side. And then these are going to be sewed together for the actual curtain rod that actually is going to be for the curtain for this. I don't know why I'm all over the place in these videos. It's not like that's my first time doing a video. Lord Jesus, Johnny. These are for the hanging portions for it, because this is actually a wall hanging, so I made 5 to go across the top, and these are going to be 3 inches wide, and then of course 6 inches long, but it's going to be sewed at the top of this wall hanging. All right, so let me get this off, and then basically now it's just a matter of taking the pins off of this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and take the pins off, and then start checking to make sure everything's okay. And then take it off completely on each level. And then I'll cut all the extra fabric off of this so we can get started with the binding. This is going to be the portion where I take 2 pieces of fabric. I'm basically taking the binding and the color out of the inside of the main colors of the one of the, you can pick whatever you want. But I chose one of the fabrics from inside the actual wall hanging, and then the binding. So what you want to do is basically when you sew them, you're sewing them face to face. And I did all this and didn't realize I didn't have it filmed. And then basically when you're doing that, when you're done, you have to flip them inside out. And then what I do is I use this little cute little device, and it basically go to the corners because I already sewed all of them together. And I'm going to go to each corner and I'm going to pull that corner out, push it until that corner comes out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron this flat, because this is going to be my hooks for the actual wall hanging. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew a seam all the way around these, because these are going to be for the hooks to actually hang the wall hanging on. And I'm basically going to start at the bottom, and I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around all of these so I can show you how I'm going to put this on the wall hanging. All right, now what I'm doing is I'm taking it, I'm putting it at a 1/2 inch from the corner, but I'm actually going to put it on the base of the seam, because now I'm going to sew this in when I'm doing my binding. So when I'm done, and I can turn it around and sew it to the back. So that's going to be the curtain rod portion when I'm done. So what I'm doing is I'm starting the 2 on the ends, again, both up like that. Then I'm going to measure my end seam to see what I got left. And this is just something that I do when I'm doing this type of pieces on a quilt. And I have one that's smaller that's going to go right in the center. So I want all the 4 on both ends to be about the same. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the inside to the inside. That's 30. So now I want to make sure 15 is where I'm going to put this middle one. So that'll be right in the center. And I want to make sure it's from the seam to the seam. That's 30. So I want to make sure it's right in the center of 15. I'm going to take this one and put this one right in the middle. Pin that one in place, because I want to make sure they're in place for when I'm sewing the binding, so it'll go into with the binding. Now I'm going to take each one of these, and I'm going to go in the middle of each one of these, and that's 14, so I'm going to go right in the middle with 7. And then I'll make sure this is right in the seam of 7, right in the center of the 7, which gives it enough space in between each one. And that's right in the center, right there. Pin this one in place. This way, when I'm doing this, it'll be in the place of where I want to sew it, because when I do this binding, I'm going to come along here and I'm going to sew this with the binding, so that everything gets flipped when I'm done. So that way when I do the binding, it'll be already in place. Now I'm going to do the binding. I'm going to show you. What I do with these bindings is I use these things called doohickeys. And this is basically when I'm doing binding, and I don't know why my lighting is a little dark right here. So let me bring you closer. Come on, closer. Yeah. All right. So that's basically what it is, and I roll this up when I do the binding. So it's already in one place, and I just have to unroll it as I'm doing it. All right, so now I'm going to turn this around so you can see the binding portion. Now, I will need to make sure this is near me this way, because I need to turn it to where I'm going to do the open form of how I sewed it together to make, actually pressed it from a 2.5 inch to this. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the corner, and I want to start right along that seam, and I'm going to go all the way around and do a 1/4 inch seam, make sure my needle's up so I can get this under, and then I'm just going to basically go a little bit past the corner, because I want to make sure that when I come back around I can tie it all together. So I got to give myself some room to sew with, so I can give myself a little bit more than that. And there goes the ironing on the paws. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the sewing on a few stitches. Am I recording? Yeah. Yeah, it's recording. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a few stitches, and then I'm going to reverse this, because I want to make sure I have it all the way to the corner. And I'm going to go all the way to that corner. This is the binding portion. This is the last step of completion of this wall hanging. Now, basically what I'm doing is I'm going through and making sure I'm under the actual flip of the hanger part, and it's all in there with the binding. So when I get back around, I can flip it under, and I'm going to show you that when I get back to that step. So let me get this portion done, and again, I'll do this all the way around, but I want to make sure I have it within the under the seam, so when I go to flip it over. All right, here's the finished product. I do have a message starting right here. And it says, "With love from Mom," inside the stenciling here. And then there's the hangings for the top portion. And then, of course, the binding around the side, which is the same as the hanging portions right up here. And the last thing I do in all my quilts is I use a tag that I use for all my quilting. Made, designed, and created by, in my name, from the heart. That is my tags that I use for all quilting items. And as you see, you can see right here that backwards of made with love from Mom across the bottom right here. And it is completed with this is the complete order with the wall hanging. I'm trying to get this back out. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 microwave koozies and 2 pot holders. I basically learned how to sew, how to crochet, how to quilt, practically from my grandmother when I would spend times in the bayous of Louisiana at her home during the summer vacations, or anytime I was out of school. I would go there and learn and help her around the house. And then I learned how to quilt. Actually, back in the day, we used to quilt in her living room on an old wooden frame, all by hand. Now we have the new technology, and I love it, believe it or not. But I do get in there, and if I have to, sew things by hand. So again, this video is going to be more of my journey, starting this channel with my sewing. I also promote other channels, but also in the descriptions below, you will see the links to where I even sell a lot of my quilts. I do have some quilts that I got to get listed that are already done. Wall hangings, microwave koozies, which are like these, where you can put them in the microwave, put your bowl in there and that kind of stuff. Pot holders, even wall hangings. You name it, I do it. So those links will be in the description bar below, where you can catch those type of things where I do sell those items. And if you have any questions having to do with sewing, quilting, machines, if I know the answer, I'll get it for you and share that with you and share your answers. Who knows, maybe I can even do a sit-down Q&A here in my quilting room. This was in the basement where I used to do my reselling with. Well, I still do reselling with, but I took over this room because we weren't using it. It was a formal dining room, and it's nice and big. And I got the big quilt here machine, and it can do up to a king size super king quilt. And so I have many projects to do. And so that's what I'll be doing, and bringing you on my journey on how I sew, tips and tricks on that type of thing. And if you ever have any questions, please don't feel like any question's a stupid question, because remember, all questions are a good question because you're asking it. If this is your first time, please do me a favor. Don't forget to do me a favor. It's free. Right below the video, that word subscribe, make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you hit the notifications of all. Right next to it, there's that thumbs up. Make sure you hit the thumbs up because I would greatly appreciate it. It does promote my channel, as well as leave me those comments below because I'll be glad to answer them for you. And I do answer all comments. And as I say before I end each and every one of my videos, love always. Love is always free. Please be kind to one another till we meet into another chat or live somewhere on YouTube world and in the community of the social media. Later. Peace out, and y'all come back now. You hear?